Good evening, visitors. Welcome to the Australian War Memorial's Last Post ceremony. My name is Craig Burrell, and joining us today from the Australian Army is Warrant Officer Class 1, Cheryl Elston. This evening, we remember and commemorate the battle at Fromelles. On the 19th of July 1916, the last of the Australians to arrive in France from Egypt became the first to take part in a major operation when the 5th Australian Division joined the 61st British Division in an attack on German positions near Fromelles. A feint designed to draw German reserves away from the Battle of the Somme to the south, the operation was conducted in broad daylight under direct observation and heavy machine gun fire. It was a disaster. In less than 24 hours, 5,533 Australians became casualties. Some 2,000 of those were dead. The 61st Division, having contributed about a third of the attacking force, suffered over 1,500 casualties. Realising the significance of Fromelles to our young nation, Charles Bean returned to walk over the ground on the day of the armistice to think, reflect, and record before the battlefield returned to peace. We found the old no man's land simply full of our dead. The skulls and bones and torn uniforms were lying about everywhere. He described Fromelles as one of the bravest and most hopeless assaults ever undertaken by the AIF. This evening, we're honoured to welcome Mr. John King, President of the Return and Services League of Australia, ACT branch. We welcome the veterans who have served, those that are still serving, and the families that love and support them. We acknowledge the members of RSL and Services Clubs Association, RSL Victoria, and RSL Queensland who are watching the broadcast of this ceremony across Australia. During this evening's ceremony, wreaths will be laid at the base of the Pool of Reflection by visitors to the memorial, students on behalf of Mildura Christian College Victoria, and 6-wing Air Force cadets with 410 Army Cadet Unit from South Australia. Australia's Federation Guard is the tri-service ceremonial unit of the Australian Defence Force. They provide a ceremonial presence at civil and military events and during visits to Australia by foreign dignitaries. The Guard will now dismount the catafalque party from the tomb of the unknown Australian soldier. If you're able, please stand and join in singing the national anthem.
Catapult Party, attention! Catapult Party, present! Arms!
Australians, oh, let us rejoice, for we are one and free. With golden soil and wealth for toil, our home is good by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty, rich and rare. In history's page, let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains, then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
Catapult Party, shoulder! Arms! Catapult Party, order! Arms!
Please be seated if you can do so. The Australian War Memorial was the vision of Charles Bean, Australia's First World War official historian. Bean landed with the Australian troops on Gallipoli and stayed with them at the front through to the end of the war. The idea of this national memorial and museum came to him at Pozières, France, in the depths of the bloody fighting of 1916. Bean's idea was that this would be a place where families and friends could mourn their loved ones buried in faraway places. It would also be a place that could help all Australians understand what these men and women had endured and what they had done for us. Bean's vision, to which we remain true, is best expressed as inscribed in the entrance to the memorial's galleries. Here is their spirit, in the heart of the land they loved, and here we guard the record which they themselves made. Tonight, we will read the story behind just one of those on the Roll of Honour, which lists the names of more than 102,000 men and women who have given their lives for us in war and on operations for more than a century. But first, we present a lament, Flowers of the Forest. Wreaths or floral tributes will now be laid at the base of the pool of reflection.
Today we remember and pay tribute to Private John Joseph Goulding. John Goulding was born in 1883 in Holbeach, England, the son of William and Alice Goulding. He grew up alongside 4 brothers and 1 sister. Goulding came to Australia when he was just 6 years old and received his education at Southport State School. He was working as a labourer in Queensland at the outbreak of war in 1914. John Goulding enlisted in the Australian Imperial Force on the 30th of August 1915 at the age of 32. He was assigned to the 31st Battalion and embarked on the 9th of November 1915 aboard the troop ship Wandilla. Goulding arrived at Egypt in December 1915 and then the Western Front in June 1916. He had served just 3 days in frontline trenches before taking part in his first major battle near the French village of Fromelles. The battle began on the 19th of July. Australian troops were tasked with attacking the German front line surrounding the treacherous Sugarloaf salient. The heavily manned salient extended outwards into no man's land, offering the enemy an advantageous position from which they could fire on advancing troops from multiple directions. Bombardment of enemy lines had been taking place for 3 days prior to the beginning of the battle, and the Allies were confident that the enemy had not survived it and that they could easily attain their objectives. Unfortunately, the bombardment only signalled to the enemy that they should anticipate an attack, allowing them time to prepare for the onslaught. The enemy had survived the shelling and were able to quickly man their machine guns and begin their own bombardment once the shells stopped falling. The advancing Allied troops walked into a relentless hail of machine gun fire, which decimated several waves of Australian soldiers. The German front line was eventually captured, but owing to the overall failure of the battle, the troops were forced to withdraw. In just one night, Australian casualties stood at a staggering 5,533 killed, missing or wounded. Official war historian Charles Bean labelled the attack the worst 24 hours in Australian history. Many went missing during the onslaught of Fromelles. Private John Goulding had last been seen in the front line when it was heavily shelled by the enemy. A small coin purse and identity disc belonging to Goulding had been found by the enemy and were returned to his family, leading authorities to believe that he may have been taken prisoner. His mother Alice wrote to Base Records several years after her son's disappearance, begging for information. I was promised that further inquiries would be made and that I would be notified. I have heard no further of him. I have waited patiently with an aching heart for news of him. If only I could know that he did not suffer too much from the Huns if I fell in their hands. He did not stand long, but I do hope that something further will be made known to me. Although 3 years has passed, it seems but as yesterday. I am still waiting. I know he was not the only one by thousands, but he was a good son. He has paid the price as many others have done, but in all the world there is no love like a mother's love for her children. I know this war has just begun for mothers that dearly love their boys all over the world. God help them to bear it. After several years, it was determined that Private Goulding had been killed in action shortly after the battle commenced. In 1919, Base Records assured Alice Goulding that a search was being undertaken in the area surrounding Fromelles, with a view to locating unregistered graves. She was assured that if found, the grave would be photographed and copies would be sent to her. Alice Goulding died in 1922, never having received further news about the fate of her son. No grave had been found, and it appeared that Private Goulding had disappeared without a trace. It was not until 2008 when a mass grave was discovered near Pheasant Wood, near Fromell, that his fate was uncovered. Excavations took place which discovered the remains of Australian and British soldiers who had been lost in the Battle of Fromell. Among them was Private John Goulding. Goulding was identified through DNA matching to his Australian descendants. His remains were exhumed and reinterred in the Pheasant Wood Military Cemetery beneath the inscription, "In memory of your supreme sacrifice, never forgotten, reunited now in peace, mother, son, and family." His name is listed on the Roll of Honour of my right among almost 62,000 Australians who died while serving in the First World War. His photograph is displayed today beside the pool of reflection. This is but one of the many stories of service and sacrifice told here at the Australian War Memorial. We now remember Private John Joseph Goulding, who gave his life for us, for our freedoms, and in the hope of a better world.
Please stand for the ode and the sounding of the last post.
Catapult party, shoulder, arms.
They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
Catapult party, present. Arms. Catapult party, shoulder, arms.
Lest we forget.
Lest we forget.
Catapult party in words. Turn. Catapult party, quick. March.
We leave you this evening with the words of the memorial's founder, Charles Bean. Many a man lying out there at Pozieres or in the low scrub at Gallipoli, with his poor, tired senses barely working through the fever of his brain, has thought in his last moments, well, it's over. but in Australia, they will be proud of this. Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, that concludes the last post ceremony. On behalf of the Director and staff, thank you for visiting the Australian War Memorial today and for your continued support during the Memorials Development Project. We wish you all a very pleasant evening.